In life, you will always be faced with a series of God-ordained opportunities, brilliantly disguised as problems and challenges. If you've lost your job, don't say that I've been laid off. Just say I've been given an opportunity by the universe to find my life work. Now you're taking it from a different perspective. Now you become an active force in your life. Now you are the one, rather than running from things as they begin to change, you become a change driver because you know that you've got the power within you to make the difference. This force, this power, this energy that you have, that's more powerful than anything that can ever happen. You're more powerful than your circumstances or anything that you can experience right now. Decide that you're going to commit yourself to act on your ideas, to become happy. Commit yourself to live your dream. Commit yourself to become the architect of your future. And it really, as you begin to operate out of this consciousness, you begin to experience a different level of living in terms of commitment.
Nothing will ever turn out as we expect. And so no matter how much we prepare for one turn of fate, something will sneak up from the blind side. When that time comes, as it will, the people who survive and even triumph over the unanticipated will be people who are ready to adapt. They will step out of the path of the charging bull. They will step back and let something else bear the brunt of impact. It's always been important to be flexible and far-sighted, and when we can't anticipate, being prepared for all possibilities.
I want to go back to what you were talking about with character. Are there particular things that you believe every person should have to build a strong, or I'm not sure what the right word would be, meaningful character?
I think character mainly is developed out of adversity. I know in my life, it's been in my failures that I've discovered myself. And it's been in my failures I've discovered things that I really probably do well. But it's also been in my failures things that I've discovered about myself that I thought...
Is it just discovery, though, or is it like, can you build your character?
Oh, I think you build it off of it, but I think you have to discover first. I think awareness is always on the front end. You can't grow yourself if you don't know yourself. So I think awareness is huge. You have to be aware of yourself. Strengths, weaknesses, the whole deal. And once you're aware of yourself, then you have to take your giftedness and maximize your strengths, and then you have to make the right choices. But awareness is on the front end, and we don't hear a lot about awareness.
How can you develop awareness?
Well, first of all, I think you need other people's help. I hear people all the time say, well, I think I'm very self-aware, and I always get amused with that because we're not. We all have blind spots. I have blind spots. So if there's any self-awareness from me, it's because I've had somebody speak into my life. And one more thing on character, okay? I was having an interview with a major CEO of a large software company. And so I asked him, I said, talk to me about your failures like I do in my learning lunches. This was on an executive circle call where I was on the phone and other executives were listening in. So I said, talk to me about your failures. I said, what would you like to go in your life and do over? Get the do-over. So what's your top do-over? And he said something very interesting to me. He said, I've had failures and I've had a lot of mistakes, made some wrong decisions, but I don't think I want to do any of them over. And I said, you're kidding me. You mean if you could go back and correct a failure, a mistake, you wouldn't want to go back and correct it? He said, no. He said, the lessons I learned out of my failures probably are a lot more valuable than if I'd have just made a successful decision and moved on. He said, who I am today is based upon not having do-overs and learning out of my adversity and difficulty and struggles and darkness. And I thought it was a fantastic answer. It really talked to me a lot. And I thought to myself, I think that's a perfect example of leaders building character out of their failure and out of their adversity.
There's another side of the stress response.
So what would that stress be called? What's that type of stress?
So unfortunately, there's no name for this. This is one of the important things. Maybe we'll figure it out today.
Okay.
Maybe your audience will figure it out.
Yeah.
They're a smart bunch, and they're living this stuff too. So, unfortunately, there isn't a word for this. But
This is one type of stress.
This is one type of stress, which is you're too activated, you're too alert, you're too agitated, and you want to be less alert, less activated, and less agitated.
The alert stress.
That's right. We could call it the alert stress, hyper-alert stress.
Hyper-alert stress.
Let's just do that for sake of conversation today. And we are by no means a nomenclature committee, so we can always revise later.
Yeah.
There's another side of stress, which is when there are a lot of things happening in the world, pandemics, you can't work because there's another shutdown, or there's strife in your life, or things are really challenging and you're feeling exhausted and you can't get mobilized and alert enough. And this has never really been cleanly laid out for people. That, and what I call the whole process is one of limbic friction. Okay, so the limbic system are these areas deep in the brain. Limbic literally means edge. They're near the edge of the brain. And when we're stressed, there's a lot of activity in these brain regions. And then we got our forebrain, our prefrontal cortex for the aficionados. And when we're in a thinking and calm and deliberate and rational manner, when we can control our body and our mind, it's called top-down processing. We're controlling ourselves. But there's a lot of friction with that limbic pathway. I promise I'll get to the practices soon. So when there's this friction, we can call it limbic friction for sake of discussion. You can't control all those impulses and all that anxiety or fatigue for too long. And in fact, as you get more tired, or if someone has frontal damage, if they have brain damage to the frontal lobes, what you find is they become more impulsive. When they feel like sleeping, they just sleep, even if it's socially inappropriate. When they feel like yelling or screaming or swearing, they just do that. And so there's two kinds of limbic friction. One is when we're too activated and we want to calm down, and we're trying to say, okay, calm down. Don't say the thing that you shouldn't say. Don't do the thing you shouldn't do. And then there's the other kind of limbic friction, which is the world is happening really fast and we feel buried, we're overwhelmed, and we need to get more activated.
We need more energy.
We need more energy. We need to be able to lean into life, and we're feeling overwhelmed.
What's that called?
Well, we should come up with a name now. So that would be
exhaustion stress,
or
overwhelm stress,
or overwhelm stress. Or now a lot of people start giving these names to things that sound almost like clinical syndromes, which sometimes they are, but they'll say things like adrenal burnout, which actually doesn't exist.
Adrenal fatigue.
Now, there is something called adrenal insufficiency syndrome, which is a real medical condition where people can't actually produce enough adrenaline. But most of us have enough adrenaline in our bodies to last 200 years, 2 lifetimes. So the adrenals don't really burn out. What happens is people are so overactivated, they're in this alertness, hyper-alert stress for so long, that eventually they kind of crash into the over-fatigue stress. Okay.
So one turns into the other one.
Right. So the first thing for anyone trying to navigate stress, and then we'll talk about trauma, is to understand in what kind of stress they're dealing with. Are you exhausted and having a hard time getting your energy up? Or is your energy too high and you're having a hard time getting your energy down? Because the solutions to those are often quite different. So on the previous time we met, we talked about a tool for calming the body very quickly, which is this double inhale, long exhale. Typically the inhales are done through the nose, the exhale through the mouth. So the physiological sigh, which was discovered by scientists in the 30s, and then Jack Feldman's group at UCLA has really identified the underlying brain circuits, and then my lab is now looking at this stuff in humans in a kind of more clinical setting. That double inhale, followed by an exhale, we know is the fastest real-time tool for taking one's state of alertness down.
The hyper-alert stress.
Right. You're not going to crash into sleep, but you're going from you're not feeling good, you're too agitated, you want to calm down. And what's interesting about that tool is it speaks to a principle, which is it's very hard to control the mind with the mind. So when you're stressed, just telling yourself, don't stress, don't stress, don't stress, calm down, rarely works. It also rarely works to tell someone else to calm down.
To relax. Hey, relax. Yeah.
Usually it has the opposite effect.
Don't tell me to relax.
And it can be damaging for relationships. If you've ever, someone's really stressed and you tell them to relax, sometimes it actually can create more friction and they don't feel supported.
What should they do in that moment?
They should look to the body. The nervous system includes the brain, but also all the connections to the body and back again. And so when you can't control your mind, you want to do something purely mechanical, like the physiological sigh. Because that, once you take control of the body in that way, then the mind starts to fall under the umbrella of this top-down control again. Top-down control is what children and puppies don't have. If we had I've got a 10-year-old bulldog. His name's Costello. He barely does anything now because he's Costello. But when he was a puppy, everything was a stimulus. He would walk over, pick up a cord, and chew on it. Then he'd drop it, and he'd pivot to something else. And it's because they literally have no prefrontal cortex wired into this limbic system. They don't have this suppression. So there's no friction. The limbic system just does whatever it wants. And actually in humans with frontotemporal dementia, and in certain people who have frontotemporal brain damage, they become very impulsive.